Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this RTS Futures session on documentary making. I'm Ed Gove. I'm a journalist at Channel 4 News. Over the next hour, we're going to be discussing a whole bunch of aspects of documentaries, as many as we can possibly cram in. We'll be looking at story finding, structuring, research, pitching, shooting, contributors, and hopefully a whole lot more. Fingers crossed, by the time we're all finished, you'll have picked up some great tips and be ready to venture out and make documentaries. And in a moment, we're going to meet the people who will tell you how to do it. But while you're here, RTS Futures holds free monthly events for graduates and those in the early stages of their TV careers. We cover a wide range of inspiring topics across all TV output: drama, comedy, reality, you name it, whatever, we'll do it. And through our events, we provide top tips and guidance on everything from CV writing to networking to help you on your way. So let's meet who we've got on our panel. We're waiting for one person to join us, but in the meantime, let's meet Kat Hayes. Kat is an Emmy-winning producer. She heads up AJ+'s field team, overseeing deployments across the US. As part of that, she is in charge of a weekly documentary series reporting on marginalized communities and social affairs. Before all of that, she was at Channel 4 News, where she shot, produced, and edited documentaries on underreported issues. Her digital documentary on Mexican femicide was nominated for an RTS award. And I think quite excitingly, she worked with me for a bit. Kat, what do you think makes a good documentary?
Hi, Ed. Yeah, so I would say obviously a good idea, but then time, access, and a bit of luck, to be honest with you. I don't think you can ever kind of assure yourself that it's going to be brilliant without that element of the unknown. But yes, I'll go into it in a little bit more detail later, but I think those three elements are really key: time, being able to develop access with good contributors, and yeah, that element of luck.
Fab. Well, we'll dig into that in a minute, but for now, let's meet Amy Thompson. Amy is joining us live from Ecuador, where she's currently shooting for a new documentary series. She is an assistant producer specializing in wildlife filmmaking, and she's usually based in Bristol when she's not off gallivanting, I guess. She has worked on productions for the BBC, Channel 4, PBS, and Smithsonian, and is recently field directing on the landmark BBC series A Perfect Planet. She's currently working at Silverback Films on a new series for Netflix and was selected as one of Edinburgh TV Festival's One to Watch in 2020. Thanks for being here. What would you say are some of the main rewards and some of the challenges of wildlife filmmaking?
Yeah, so I think one of the rewards is definitely like the travel, visiting these amazing places and meeting incredible people who are so passionate and seeing some really, really cool animals. But I'd say that's also probably one of the negatives is, you know, being away from loved ones for a long time and like, you know, living in conditions that maybe aren't quite as comfortable as you normally have at home. So yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. And we will at some point be joined by our third panelist, Saleyha Ahsan, who has literally just texted me to say she is on her way. So she will be with us, and she's a fantastic documentary maker who I'll introduce when she arrives. But for now, let's start with the idea. Kat, you mentioned the idea. Where do ideas come from?
I think ideas come from everywhere, basically, but I do think that you need to be kind of actively seeking them out and like reading around and watching stuff, speaking to people. And so I oversee a team of 6 producers, and I will give them like quite a large amount of time a week, which usually spills into 2, just to research and develop, which I think is kind of a unique thing in the type of format that I work with. But it's because for me anyway, the idea is so important, and having that time to develop it is actually really important, even when you're working on sort of shorter form pieces, which we do. So we work on sort of 10 to 12 minute pieces for like digital publication. But yeah, they can come from anywhere. And often for us now, we find particularly with our audience, the AJ+ audience, they're interested in news stories that are perhaps looking at a news story and kind of looking at a sort of adjacent issue to it, or like a fresh angle on a news story, for example, we find that that is something that's really popular with our audience. So for example, when things were kind of kicking off with the Black Lives Matter movement last year, one of our producers pitched a story around rural Black Lives Matter chapters, so chapters in unlikely spaces, and that was a really successful film because it did that thing of kind of taking a news story but looking at the sort of original or fresh perspective on the piece, on the story. So I would kind of encourage people to do that a bit, especially kind of you know, coming from a news background. I think news is a really good source of ideas, but not just looking at it and kind of replicating or reporting, looking at it and trying to kind of think tangentially, think outside the box with it. Yeah, that would be perhaps one avenue to go down. But yeah, there's lots of kind of places to find them, obviously.
And Amy, for you, I guess, you know, it's a slightly, maybe slightly different. You know, you're not necessarily looking at the newspapers to find out what to do. How does one go about coming up with a new documentary in the wildlife, you know, in wildlife filmmaking?
Yeah. So I guess it depends, you know, what stage of production you're at. If you're in development, you're just kind of reading and looking at everything, and you're trying to come up with new ideas for series, which are very difficult to do for the kind of really big budget programs. They typically just kind of end up being habitat based. But yeah, I think then when you're working on a production, we have about a year or so on these kind of larger landmark projects for development, 2 years shooting, 1 year editing, so 4 in total. And yeah, stories kind of can come from anywhere, from social media or reading scientific papers or news articles, or I think watching previous documentaries and finding like a new angle, new camera technology that maybe gives you a different insight, but you know, maybe trying not to have the story driven by the technology too much. But I'd say one of the biggest things is just like picking up the phone and calling scientists, calling guides and people on the ground. And you sort of, I find that I always get so much more out of like a half-an-hour phone call with somebody than I can of like, you know, 2 days of like reading around the topic myself, and they can just fast track you to like, you know, what might be a really interesting part of the story. But yeah, stories can come out anywhere.
Fantastic. Yeah, and those personal moments can sort of really make a difference. Let me come to you, Kat, with a question sort of similar to what we're talking about with ideas, but those key ingredients for really a really powerful documentary. You know, what makes a good documentary in terms of those maybe emotional moments, that access? What are we talking?
Yeah, so like what I was kind of referencing at the beginning in terms of access, time, and a good idea. So I think first off, it needs to be a good idea. And what's a good idea? Well, a good idea is something that's fundamentally interesting to you and to other people. So like often producers will come to me with like an issue or like something very overarching and ephemeral, you know, something that's going on in the news, and say something like, we want to do something on climate change, or like something just very vague, issues based. And that is not a good idea. Like a good idea is like, okay, I found this person. For example, we did a piece recently or earlier in the year around Asian hate crime. So there was a spike in the US, because our team is US based, so we do US based stories, a spike in Asian hate crimes, and one of the producers had found a contributor who had been very terribly attacked but wanted to tell their story, and you know, they'd been standing kind of at a subway stop and had been attacked there, and that, you know, their testimony was incredibly powerful, it was incredibly timely. So that is in essence a good idea. You know, it's something that needs to be reported on. It was being very underreported at the time as well, and they had found like a really compelling contributor to talk about this issue, as well as other elements as well. So they'd spoken to a kind of a community-based group that went out and gave food to the local East Asian community in New York, and other people that kind of sort of bolstered the story as well. And that was a good idea because there was real specifics to it. So there was really strong contributors. It was an important and timely topic for us, and there were good visuals as well around New York and Chinatown and things like that. So again, also you need to consider the medium that you're working in, and sometimes actually the strength of a contributor's story, for example, might trump everything, and you kind of go with it because it's just such a powerful story. But more often than not, you kind of do need to know what you're going to see, and I would say that more and more as well, we're kind of producing things thinking about sequences. So I'm really trying to encourage the producers all the time to be like, okay, you're going to talk to this person, but what are you going to see when you're with them? Like, what are you going to be doing? What are you going to actively be doing together? It's really nice to see people kind of breaking away from that traditional like static sit down with cutaways and reverses to something that's much more dynamic, which I really like and really champion in our pieces. So we did a piece recently with the Gullah Geechee community in South Carolina, which is a really interesting community of formerly enslaved people who have basically kind of preserved their culture and identity on this island that they kind of went to as a refuge after slavery, and now bits of their land are being sold off for development. It's become a big tourist hotspot, and as one of the like sequences that the producer filmed was a member of the community going onto this golf course that also is actually a graveyard for members of the Gullah Geechee community. And it was an interview, but from doing that sequence, they got really powerful kind of interactions of him talking to these sort of golfers kind of going along the lawn and showing where the graveyard was in this juxtaposition. And I think that's something that you should always be thinking about, that what are you seeing, what are you doing in these pieces, because I think that is ultimately what kind of brings something to life, and you should sort of think in that way when you're trying to produce a piece. So think in sequences and not just static interviews. So yeah, I guess that's one element of it. And then another element is kind of the time that you have. For us, it's not that much when we produce our pieces. We only have kind of a week or two. For Amy, obviously, it's a much longer. It's kind of an amazingly long time frame, and you can see it obviously in the quality of films that you're producing. But yeah, time is always a good thing to have as well, I'd say.
Saleyha is back with us, and hopefully with slightly better signal. So we were talking about where ideas come from and the sort of thing that it is that turns maybe a good documentary into a great documentary. What are those characteristics?
So what I have found is that for me, and many mentors who I've spoken to about documentary making, filmmaking, when I've spoken about potential projects, have always said, do what you know best. You have, your authentic voice. You will know something so well and so intricately that no one else will be able to tell that story in the way that you can. And for a lot of the beginning work that I did, that was precisely what I did. I played to my strengths. I had access to healthcare facilities, healthcare stories, for example. And I suppose I'm a little bit of an immersive filmmaker. I tend to want to know the subject really well. I like to develop relationships with my contributors and my protagonists. Sometimes the project doesn't start as a film. It just starts somewhere that I've worked and I have met incredible people. And then I think, crikey, they've got a story to tell. I want to tell their story. Will they allow me to tell their story? So there will have already been a period of time where trust has been built. I haven't always done it that way. I have sometimes just arrived, but I feel for me, the stories that, moving from the good to the great are the ones where the person that I'm filming has already who I have already established a relationship with in a non-film setting. We've known each other as two human beings or two colleagues, and I know about them, I know their life, I know their challenges, and that has inspired me to want to make a film about it. It's how I've done some of my stories, my films from within the emergency department. I don't start a new job in a hospital thinking, great, I'm going to make a film in this hospital, but inevitably, you know, life and death and everything else happens in these places, and it is a very story rich environment, and it's also a place where people want to tell their stories and don't want to be anonymous or forgotten, and I've been able to combine that. It's not, again, for me, it's not just limited to healthcare settings. It's any story or any environment where you know, you have the key ingredients, a story that needs to be told, someone that can tell it, and you know, the time to be able to do it. But for me, it's trust, building trust and a relationship with those that are going to be in the film is pretty key and crucial.
I think so, yeah. And I'm going to come to you next, Amy, but I just wanted to say to all of the people watching, please, if you've got any questions for our panel, do send them in. The earlier you get them in, then you'll be higher up the list of the questions as I go through them. But Amy, I wanted to come to you because we were talking a lot about, you know, contributors and those, you know, those people who make your film. Well, you don't work with people. So how do you wrangle that? You know, it's in some cases you can get an interviewee to sit down or go somewhere that you need them to, but you know, you're dealing with nature, tooth and nail, or whatever they say.
Yeah. Animals don't read the script. Yeah, and I think when, you know, Kat mentioned about the time that we have for our shoots, it's because, you know, we're waiting basically a lot of the time for the behavior to happen, you know, in the right time, the right place, like the right light. And there's so many like variables that need to line up to that perfect shot. And yeah, I think a lot of natural history storytelling is moving towards more character-driven stories. So you want to kind of meet an animal and, like, you know, understand what it is that they like want and what their challenge is and what it feels like to live in their world. What does it sound like? Maybe not so much what it smells like, but you know, it's all about kind of creating that world. And I think trying to give the audience an emotional connection with our subject that we're filming is really important. And, you know, then if you are trying to give a kind of conservation message or even an educational message about that habitat, about that ecosystem or that particular type of behavior, I think, you know, it resonates with an audience more if they're kind of going on this emotional journey with your like hero caterpillar. So yeah, I think there's been a big drive to try and make it feel more character driven, like lots of point of view shots and yeah, all that fun stuff, working it in.
Fantastic. And so to come to sort of back to something we started to touch on a bit, about ideas and things for films. You know, how do you know if an idea is either too big or maybe not big enough for a documentary? You know, so some things might seem really interesting, but actually what they are is just a really cool fact. Kat?
Yeah, I guess I'm for us that's not too much of an issue because we have different teams that perhaps would actually deal with a smaller size story. So at AJ Plus we have like a news team that works on day-to-day news, like, you know, fast turnaround, just, you know, straight news pieces, and then an explainer team, and then the field team. So for example, sometimes, yeah, we do exactly get something like that where you're like, that's a really cool fact, and we would probably pass it on, or a really cool interview, one person interview, and we would probably pass it on to the news team. So yeah, I suppose I'm kind of in a slightly different position in that respect, because we probably, if it was good enough, we probably would still do it just in a different format, which is sort of, I guess, the beauty of digital in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was the sort of difference between documentaries for digital versus documentaries for TV. You know, you worked on Channel 4 News. You know, you worked on the TV side, and you're on the digital side. How do you see that difference?
Yeah, it's really interesting, I think, because when I'm thinking about how I answer the questions as well, I think there is a real difference there, because we are obviously trying to connect with our contributors and create emotional journeys as well, but we are a little bit more restricted in terms of our timeframes for developing pieces. So kind of, I think it's useful to kind of give that context of what I work on, which is sort of, as I said, 10 to 12 minute pieces for digital publication, primarily on YouTube, and we're trying to get something out like roughly once a week. So that means that we have a kind of 6 to 8 week turnaround, which is actually very generous on the digital side, as you know, Ed. That is actually great, but it does mean that, like, in terms of what we're doing, we do exist in a slightly hybrid world between sort of, you know, longer broadcast documentaries, which would traditionally be half an hour, and digital, which is, you know, digital documentaries, which is kind of you know, 10 to 20 minutes. So that's kind of the space that we work in, and so we kind of have to weigh up those constraints, and what I'm always thinking about fundamentally, which is what it's not different from broadcast, I suppose, in this respect, is what do our audiences want to watch, and what are they interested in, and so we focus on that and try to make films for them, you know, as a result of that. And I think that's the same for digital and broadcast, but we just kind of exist in a slightly hybrid space where we're sort of, I think, turning things around slightly more quickly, you know, kind of a little bit more time than news, but perhaps a little bit less time than a kind of full-blown broadcast documentary. Yeah.
Great. Saleyha, you know, you said before about how, you know, you don't go into a new job thinking, oh, maybe I'll make a film about this. How did you get to be doing, you know, because it's unusual to be working as an emergency doctor and also to be a filmmaker. So can you tell us about how that happened?
Yeah, so just answering that other question about, you know, is it a fact or can it be turned into film? If I find, because I'm a freelancer and I you know, ideas and facts, I look for facts and interesting facts, but then I try to find the story behind the facts, because there will be facts, but then there will be people affected by those facts. So that's how I would then try to turn something into more than a bite-sized piece of news stating an interesting fact. Who are the people behind this? Who's affected by it? You know, how's it impacted their lives over what time frame? Is it a quick thing, or is it you know, a slow burn? But how did it begin? Well, I didn't begin life as a doctor. I began life as a journalist. So I was a BBC journalist, and I then got the opportunity to join the army. I had a place at Sandhurst, and because I wanted to know what that was like, and this was during the 90s where we were deploying to Bosnia, I took that. I spoke to the BBC and they said, you know, plenty of ex-military personnel within the media, you can always come back. So that was the plan. And interestingly enough, I was shortlisted for a BBC News trainee production scheme, but I also had a place at Sandhurst, and I had to make a decision between the two. So I wrote to Anthony Lloyd-Jones, who is the correspondent for the Times at the time, and he was doing a lot of dispatches from the Balkans at the time. So I wrote to him, and, you know, I will, you know, I'd super recommend write to people, because you just never know. He actually wrote back. He wrote me back a letter, handwritten, beautiful 2 to 3 page letter. I was blown away. And then we followed it up with a phone call. And I will never forget this. He said, the army is a brilliant experience. You will have the best time as a troop commander with your soldiers, but then leave and get a real life. So that's what I did. So I joined, I had a brilliant experience. I can now speak about the military, do projects about the military from an informed position, and I've lived the experience. And I think that that's also part of what I bring to my documentary film making is having the lived experience as well. I'm not great at sort of creating things. I need to, as in like out of thin air, I need to have lived them and experienced them. So I use that in my filmmaking. And then whilst I was in Bosnia, I saw some horrific things happening from an injury perspective and got inspired to apply to medical school. So I did do that. So I applied to medical school, went to medical school as a civilian after leaving the army after 4 years, and at the same time started to freelance again. So, and it was brilliant. When I reflect on sort of my luck at the time, but you know, my opening line was always, I've just left the army, I'm an ex-army captain, I've just come back from Bosnia, I've got an idea for you. And I just had like responses to my emails, my pitching emails. I don't have that much luck now. But I did, as soon as I got back, I picked up a camera and headed off to the places that I hadn't been allowed to go to when I was in the forces. So I went to Palestine and I went to Kashmir and made some films. When I say made some film, I spoke to production companies, pitched some ideas, and realized that I really enjoyed the pitching process. I love pitching, so that helps. And
well, I want to come back to pitching, because I think that's something that will be really useful to hear about, is that advice on that. But I want to come to Kat and to Amy and ask about sort of their route in. So Kat, what, you know, would you advise? We've had a question in from Kieran. Would you advise, you know, going to uni or working your way up in media? You know, start as a runner maybe. That's something maybe you can talk about, Amy. Kat, go for it.
Should I start? I don't think there's like a right or wrong route to this. So perhaps it might be helpful if I give a bit of my background. I graduated in 2006, 2007, basically into the financial crash. And kind of, I'd done English literature at Sussex, and I kind of, I knew I wanted to do, at the time, something in film. I'd done films at uni, kind of, you know, amateur stuff. And I started actually as a film runner, so driving people around, doing all that kind of stuff. And, you know, it was a really tricky time, just getting kind of odd jobs. And then I finally got a job at a charity as a sound person, basically, with a boom and an SQM mixer. And it was really great experience, actually, technical experience. I always kind of had this sense, because I'd done English literature, that I needed technical experience. I think also slightly, perhaps being a woman as well, actually, I kind of felt like I needed to be technical. It was a bit that I wasn't sure about, so I felt like I needed to get really good at it. And so it was a great experience, traveled around the country with this organisation and filmed and edited stuff for 2 years, and then realised I wasn't actually getting anywhere, because actually the charity world and journalism, although the skills were transferable, no one thought that I could do the job, because it was a different industry. And I always found that really surprising, actually. There wasn't that kind of openness, and perhaps it's different now. It's kind of hard to sort of advise, because it maybe has shifted. But I realised that I wasn't going to get that step up. And I think perhaps if you do go down the conventional runner route in TV production, that is, you know, the doors would open a little bit more, but I didn't see them opening. So I went and did a journalism master's at City. So I did the TV journalism course, which I think is a very tried and tested route, for good or bad. Like, you know, I found the course, I found the access, actually, that the course gave me to work experience and contacts that I didn't have before, really was the thing that kind of jump started my career. And I don't think that that's actually a good thing, but it was the way it worked for me. I didn't have a, I didn't have a media background. Like I didn't have any contacts. I didn't know anyone. So that was kind of my way in. And actually having done that work experience beforehand, those 2 or 3 years gave me a little bit of a head start on the graduates there, I think. So I got kind of better placements and I got kind of better jobs, and it's sort of one thing led to another. So I started as a, at the Telegraph actually as like a video producer, sort of turning around videos for their news website, and then I jumped from there to being like the features producer. So then I was getting out and about and filming and putting things together, and then I jumped from there to Channel 4 News. But I was always trying to film because I felt like that was the thing that I really, really wanted to do. So I was just always, in every single job, I was always angling for filming opportunities every single time. So I would, do kind of go above and beyond to try and do that and build up a show reel of stuff, edit it together, like just always kind of looking for those opportunities. And then and then I went to Channel 4 News and kind of did a bit of both, actually, kind of oversaw a team and was still making films until I kind of went into my current job. So I've kind of gone a little bit more into the sort of management side of things, and doing more sort of commissioning and overseeing and sort of running teams. But that experience of being on the ground and filming and organising teams and shooting stories and knowing what goes into it, I think has really helped with this job. And I would say that each step has definitely helped me. However, like, painful the step has been, some of them have been pretty painful. They definitely sort of have helped me along the way, and they have definitely. I think it's a tough industry. I think particularly in the UK, but I do think that you can get there in the end, but it perhaps takes longer than you think it does when you first graduate. And I think that's something that I also had to learn as well, that I think when you first graduate you think, next year will be my year, and it actually probably is going to be more like 5 to 10 years before you're in any sort of place where you feel vaguely happy with what you're doing. So I'd say stick at it.
Fantastic. That's a message. Yeah, 5 to 10 years. You're nearly there. Amy, let's come to you, because wildlife filmmaking is a particularly competitive area in an already very competitive industry. And what you're doing, as you've so subtly demonstrated with your glorious backdrop, is what loads of people want to do. So what got you to Ecuador, basically?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, both amazing hearing both of your stories, Saleyha and Kat. Yeah, especially Saleyha, I can't believe you've had like 3 careers basically. But yeah, I also, like Kat, did a kind of tried and tested route, I guess. So like growing up, I watched the making ofs and pretty much the 10 minutes at the end of wildlife documentaries where you see people like trudging through the forest. And as soon as I knew that was a job, that was what I was kind of aiming for. So I studied zoology, which is kind of a tried and tested route into it. It kind of gives you a background in the subject matter and, kind of demonstrates a bit of passion for the subject, I guess. And also I just really loved doing it. It's a very fun course. But I would also say that isn't something that you necessarily have to have. I think anything from your kind of, like hobbies or voluntary experience can demonstrate that you have that same passion and background knowledge for the subject. So yeah, studied zoology, and while I was doing that, I did kind of research assistant roles. So I was like, did a couple of field projects and got used to working around wildlife. I also waitressed one summer and bought a camera, and then founded an events photography company. So kind of paid my way through uni and used, like, was trying to make the camera pay for itself, basically. And then I got work experience, which is a bit crappy that it's unpaid, but it is a good route in. And that was the first time that I was kind of exposed to like TV production world, and yeah, basically it was the recommendation from that I think kind of swung it to get my first job in a small company in Glasgow called Mara Media, who do wonderful documentaries about, well, international and Scottish wildlife at the time. So yeah, I started as like a junior researcher on a series about the Highlands, mostly like running around making tea and coffee and like holding lights over ant nests and things like that. And then kind of built build it up from there, and still very much building. Like, that is so true what Kat says. It's a bloody slow burn. um, but also loving it every step of the way.
Of course, and so, you know, all of you shoot. How important is it to be able to shoot if you want to get into documentaries? Saleyha, let's start with you.
How important is it? Well, I can only speak for myself in that it fit with my personality. I kind of wanted to be in control of you know, what we were getting, and the only way to do that was to be behind the camera. How I think it is a pretty good skill to have and to get, and I'll tell you how it worked for me, how it happened. We were filming in Kashmir. It was 2001, just 2001, pre 9/11, and it was a project that I'd pitched to a production company based in Leeds, and it had turned into an entirely different project, but hey, we were there. The story that I'd wanted to tell was about, you know, the camps, the training camps, for example, that were all there. You know, it was an open secret. They were all there. You know, you could just walk into them. You know, their headquarters were there, right in Kashmir and in Muzaffarabad. This was, as I said, pre 9/11. But the camera operator, by the time we got to these areas, had enough and wanted to go home. And I thought, I've just got access. You can't go home. And he went, here's the camera, you do it. So he left me with the camera. And that for me was the best part of the shoot, that I stayed for an extra week. I shot lots of stuff. I got into all the nooks and crannies of the story that we hadn't been able to do as a big team. And the minute I'd got my hands on the camera and started to take control, I mean, obviously it was all pretty rookie and all very, you know, I stuck very closely to the tripod. He showed me how to use it, and that was me away. For me, that was essential. And then that gave me the confidence then to do the next project, and then the next project, and then, you know, have carried on ever since. But I think I would highly recommend getting yourself behind a camera. It's also pretty awesome. I love it.
Kat, you know, you lead a team, and would you hire someone for your team who couldn't shoot? And what other kind of skills, you know, if you're hiring someone, what kind of stuff are you looking for, particularly transferable skills from people who may not have been working, you know, in the exact same job before, but are kind of moving into the industry? What kind of jumps out for you?
Yeah, I think this is a really tricky one, because I think like I feel like the industry standard in broadcast and in digital is to hire shooting PDs. I think you see that a lot, shooting PDs. And yet I think that there is, in news anyway, there is this distinction between the reporter, the producer, and the camera, you know, the shooter. And there's a kind of sense that if you want to do something that's actually really, really good, you get everyone to do their own job. So I think there's a sense of like, there's the kind of, there's a lot of stuff that's made by, you know, multi-skilled people. And then there's a kind of another level where there's people that do separate jobs, and they're kind of, I think, there's a sort of higher production value then to them, perhaps there's more budget, more resources, or it's a sort of big kind of like, you know, flagship series, and then the roles suddenly become sort of separated out. So I would say that it's good to have like a grounding in shooting as a skill, but I do think there's a point, and there was a point with me where I kind of had to decide, okay, do I want to become a camera op? Like, do I want to go and, like, you know, just do the technical stuff, or actually do I want to do other things as well? And I think if you do really love shooting, that there's lots of opportunities to just shoot, and you should push for that, because you can do it. Like, you know, you'll always be in demand. Good shooters will always be in demand. And I probably wouldn't have given that advice like 3 or 4 years ago, but now I would say, like, if that's your passion, that's a really specific and distinct skill in itself, and don't kind of water it down, or do for a while, but fundamentally make a decision at some point that you want to do that and do it and get really good at it and get paid properly for it, basically. That's what I would say. And now in terms of what we do, like, it is actually on our team, we do separate them out, so the producers and the shooters are separate roles, and I love that, because it was something that I struggled with doing all of it, because I think it is really difficult to think editorially about the questions when you're also thinking about the technical aspects of it, and I think that's just one of the kind of unfortunate things about our industry, is that, like, it's always being squeezed. People are always being squeezed and asked to do an extra job here, an extra job there, and it's something that I think we probably should push back on a bit more. But yes, I would hire someone who didn't shoot, but who had really great ideas, because having really great ideas is also an incredible skill, and not everyone has them. So if there was someone who had really great ideas and could script really well, I would 100% hire them, because that's a producer and that's a really distinct skill in itself. And I think what we've done as a kind of the generation is had it eroded, allowed these things to sort of kind of be squeezed a little bit into one role, but they are separate roles. They should be separate jobs.
Amy, so what would you say? You've talked about your degree. You've talked about shooting your way through uni. What skills would you say that you've picked up that actually you didn't necessarily think would be as useful as they have been, and particularly skills that somebody who's a new entrant to the industry and doesn't have that big long list of credits, what might they actually already have that they just have kind of discounted?
Yeah, I think kind of adding to what Saleyha was saying before, I think your experiences from life often, you find stories and you have unique access and contacts, and certainly that was how I actually got my first job. I'd made a short film with the university doing like a bio blitz, and then we wanted to film a very specialist rare pine hoverfly in the Scottish Highlands, and I happened to have met one of the key contacts who was working on that project, and so I think utilizing like what is unique about you is really important. I mean, yeah, they, again, like Kat was saying, I don't think the kind of softer skills get celebrated as much as like the technical, but actually like communication, building like amazing relationships with your contributors, or in my case, like our contacts and scientists who are granting us access to like their lifelong projects, is really important. Organization, because you have to be so on it, like even on these longer shoots, like still like every day has like a purpose, and I have to schedule how everybody is eating and where we're moving, and everything else, and I think just like also massively persistence. Like if you keep pushing and going the extra mile, like you will find like an element of the story that somebody else has like maybe given up a stage ago. So and it's the same in kind of hunting for jobs, like just sending out tons and tons of emails, and what somebody gave me some fantastic advice to be persistent but not a pest. So like I think yeah, all that massively comes in as well. Just going the extra mile with it, for sure. It's one of those industries, but yeah, rewarding.
Yes. Persistent is, but not a pest, is a great sort of ballpark. But I think a lot of people worry that they don't know where that line is, because the person who's being irritated is the person receiving the emails. So does anyone have? Kat, you opened your mouth, so I'm going to jump to you. Kat, do you have like a rule of thumb for where that line might be?
I'd say that there are people that will email me like if there's like a big news event in their region or whatever, then they'll always email me and I'll reply or not, and that's great actually, because if something happens, you are kind of thinking, well, on our team anyway, I'll be thinking like, oh, should we do something on this? So I think if you're like targeted and strategic about your ideas and when you send them, that's a really good thing to do. Timing, so thinking, okay, something's happened, I've got an idea that's sort of adjacent to it, or they might be interested in, I'm going to send out an email now. And then I'd say like 2 emails two emails in a month, maybe 3 it's fine. I used to do this as well, and I would feel really self-conscious about it. But now on the other end of it, I do see what happens. You kind of read the email and you think, oh, I'll reply to that later. That does sound kind of interesting. And then you forget about it. And then and then I've actually had it, like someone's emailed me 2 weeks later and I thought, yeah, that was good. Okay, I'm going to follow up with it. So it does work. Yeah.
Amy, what do you say? You know, where for you is the line between persistence and pestilence, I guess?
Oh yeah, I don't know if I have quite found it. Yeah, I'd say sort of yeah, maybe emailing, like if you're, I guess, sort of asking about jobs, like maybe once every couple of months, just like a little check-in. And I think try to time it along with maybe something that you've done, like maybe you've just made a short film, or you've just completed a project, or like you've just seen that producer's documentary and you want to say, like, I really loved this specific thing about it, which like demonstrates you know, that you're paying attention. Yeah, I think trying to find those moments. But yeah, I don't know, I think the worst thing is maybe that people will just ignore you, so why not kind of err on the side of sending a few more emails?
Yeah, I would agree. And also we get so many emails every day that, like, you know.
I'm aware we're sort of heading towards the end of the event. So again, anyone wants to send in questions, do that. But I want to get into pitching as we're nearing the end. Saleyha, you said you love pitching. Pitching is your thing. What do you love about it, and what's the key to a good pitch?
Why do I love pitching? What's so good about it? Well, because I get really passionate about my stories. I really do. And, you know, I sometimes have to go and have a word with myself, because if someone else hasn't got it, I'm like, why have they not got it? I mean, this is incredible. And, you know, but I've learned to temper that now over the years, but I get really, you know, passionate because I have to divide my time between my clinical work and my filmmaking and my media work. When I turn my attention to a story, it's something that I've already decided that I am going to find a way to make it happen already. It's going to see the light of day somehow, whether I write, and, you know, okay, and if it's not going to be the documentary that I was imagining that it would be, maybe it will be a shorter clip somewhere, or maybe it will be an article, or maybe, you know, or maybe I'll pitch it to radio. I'm a bit of a polymorph. I kind of believe in the story, and I have to make that story get out there. So in terms of and the other thing that I've started to do is actually write drama now. So if those current affairs stories haven't hit documentary land, I've turned them, it hasn't been that complex, because it's literally real life, and I've turned it into a script. So for me, it is about the story, and that's why I get really passionate about the pitch, super passionate about the pitch. And I can see the film, you know, it's there, it's real. I'll have thought about the film, I'll have thought about what it will look like. It won't be just an interesting fact that I am telling someone about. It will be the story. This is the fact, but this is the person that this fact is affecting. This has been their trajectory, this has been their journey. We don't know where it's going to end yet, because I'm still following it, or, you know, whatever. So that's what I absolutely make sure when I'm pitching, is that I have a clear, it took me ages to understand when they keep saying the narrative, what's the narrative? Yeah, this was in the early days, but I make sure that I have got the key ingredients set. I know what the fact is, I know who the people are that are going to tell us the story, we know what the journey is, we know what the narrative is. I have all of that ready.
Fab. Kat, one of our eagle-eyed watchers, has spotted that on your LinkedIn you've said AJ Plus are commissioning, and DM me with your stories. So what kind of stories appeal to you, and what would make you remember to reply to the email?
Yes, definitely DM me with your stories. Yes. We're always looking for stories. I think a really important thing to say is that ideas are currency. ideas are really valuable, and people will always want to hear a good idea. I'm always looking for a really good idea. So be like careful with your ideas, value your ideas, you know, think about where you want to put your ideas. Don't give them away just kind of, you know, like that's your work. Your ideas are your work, and they're really important. And it's a really hard thing to do, to be someone who generates good ideas consistently. So yes, I'm always up for receiving good ideas, obviously, because you should be if you're a commissioner and you want to do good work, like you want good ideas. And sometimes actually I think it's hard to continually do that in a permanent role. Like it's hard to constantly be delivering, and actually you have to be kind of having these like fresh experiences, you know, as Saleyha and Amy are doing, like encountering different environments, speaking to different people. I think it's kind of hard to do it behind a desk sometimes. So yes, Ed, you were saying what tips would I give people?
What tips, and what would make a pitch stand out to you? What do you want to see when you get that email?
Yeah, what I want to see, and it just sounds so simple, but I'm constantly trying to drum it into producers, is something original, something I haven't heard before, something that surprises me or makes me go like, what? Are you serious? Like, where is this happening? What's going on? And that, like, that first kind of thing, that first detail is, I think for me, the most important thing, like a surprising, fresh, original perspective. But then you have to bear in mind the platforms that I work on, which are YouTube and social platforms, and I know that that's what our audiences are really interested in as well. So you know, everyone's responses to this will be kind of colored by what medium they're working in, and also again the audience. So I'm really always thinking about what our audience are interested in. So for example, at AJ Plus, our audiences are interested in kind of news adjacent stories. So a story, but then something that's tangential to a news story, but then something that's tangential to it. Our audience are really interested in stories about the global South diaspora. So like communities, diaspora communities from the global South. So we've just done a Pakistani American series that has done really well, audience are really interested in. Also, for example, personally, and our audience are interested in kind of accountability stories where we're sort of holding people to account, and that's kind of a standard thing, but like doing it in a very punchy and powerful way. And also kind of identity pieces that are slightly more kind of left field, and perhaps sort of tapping into sort of yeah, identity stories around different sort of spaces that people might exist in, things like that. So those for us I've kind of identified as like 4 main streams that our audiences are interested in, and then as part of that I want to get pitches that sort of tap into that, but are original, I haven't heard before, have great characters, and are visual. So if they have those kind of three or 4 things, then you'll more than likely get a follow-up email.
Yeah. And if someone is let's say a freelance filmmaker, and they're coming to you with an idea, how far along the line should they be with their piece of work, which, you know, obviously they haven't been paid for yet, before they come to you with a pitch? Because, you know, you don't want an idea, you want more, you want a fleshed out idea. So when do they come?
Yeah, that's a really interesting and important question. I'd say that like I'd always be open to speaking to someone before they've done like a pre-interview or things like that, just to kind of get a sort of, so they can get a kind of a sense check on whether they're along the right tracks with an idea. So, you know, always open to just talking to someone if they've got an idea and they just want to sound it out. And then if we were going to go further down the road in terms of like pre-production and doing like pre-interviews, reaching out to people and that kind of stuff, then that work would be paid for. And I don't think that would necessarily always be the case in other organizations, but with us, you know, that would be the case, and I think it should be the case because that is work. But yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's a difficult one to weigh up, because perhaps, you know, if the person had made a phone call and they kind of could say like, I've spoken to them and they're up for it, that probably would sway me a little bit more. But, you know, I guess there's also like an individual judgment to decide like whether you want to make that phone call to kind of be able to talk about that a little bit in a little bit more of a kind of solid way. But definitely if you're doing like proper pre-production, I think that's a slightly different thing. But maybe a call or an email to someone might be a good thing to do. But yeah.
I'm aware we're sort of nearing the end of our time, so I just want to ring you guys out for the last little drops of knowledge and wisdom that you can share. So Amy, let's start with you. What do you wish you'd known before you embarked upon your career? Maybe what mistakes have you made that you're really glad you actually made?
Yeah, I think probably I've always probably at the beginning was just quite cautious and like didn't want to say that I could do stuff if I didn't know that I could do it. And sort of, you know, slightly comparing myself to others around me, I've definitely learned that like you should just say yes to it and like just give it your bloody best and you'll probably be able to do it. So yeah, I think just like having that tenacity and like believing in yourself and going for it, and also realizing that like everybody is like learning while they're making these films. Like nobody knows the secret formula to make the perfect documentary. Well, possibly some people might, but like we're all kind of like learning in this process. So yeah, and you bring your own kind of unique perspective on something. So yeah, I think just saying yes to everything.
Fantastic. Always great advice. Saleyha, what's your favourite mistake?
Gosh, my favourite mistake. I think a bit like, you know, what we've just heard, in that I think just going for it. I think there was, I still think about it. There was a time on Channel 4 News when I was in the newsroom and they needed me to go, and sorry, there's something driving past. Anyway, yeah, they wanted me to go and film, and I just was, for some reason, a bit nervous to go and do it on my own. And I think that then, you know, created an impression that she is a bit nervous about filming, and I didn't get to go and do any more during that little stint. So, and I often do think, crikey, what if I'd just gone, yeah, great, and you know, I'd have been probably still there now. But anyway, so yeah, I agree. Just go for it. Don't hesitate. Just go for it. What's the worst? That someone will just brief you a bit better, or you know, brief you on what you could have done better, but you'll have gone and done it anyway. So definitely don't say no.
Mm-hmm. And Kat, any good mistake that you've made in your career, or fantastic advice that somebody has given you?
I think a good bit of advice would be that it's a lot about relationship building as well as skills and hard work. And I think that's a really difficult thing to kind of understand when you first start out. But particularly when you come from like an academic background where it's all about like just work hard and get your grades and you get to the next level, next level, and you might not find that it pans out for you like that in this industry. And it's because it's also about speaking to people, understanding how they've got to where they've got, building relationships and connections, not just with your contributors but with the people that you work around. Being someone that people enjoy working with is really important, and also kind of being the best people kind of know how to be sort of friendly and accommodating, someone that people want to collaborate with at all levels of the team that they're working with. So that includes like managing up and people above you as well as your peers and people below you. So it's about like thinking about also the people that can influence your career, and how do you you know, become, how do you get to know them and build relationships with them, your peers, and you know, and everyone around you, to be kind of someone that people want to work with. I think that's a really important kind of thing to think about when you're thinking about the start of your career. Relationship building is really, really, really important.
And a final quick whip around of where if somebody wanted to watch a sort of mini masterclass on how to do a documentary, you know, what for you, beyond obviously all of your own work, which is, as we know, the best ever, where would you say people should go? What should they look at if they want to learn? Amy, no time to think.
I know, just racking through every documentary I've ever watched in my head. Oh yeah, I mean, I would obviously say like sort of the big landmarks, but that's a boring answer. I'll have to try and think if I can come with another one. But yeah, like Planet Earth 2, Blue Planet 2, Our Planet, like they're all just incredible films. but I think that's a huge thing. Just watch everything and anything that you can, because it all feeds into, you know, like the number of times I've sort of had producers ask me like, what is the Love Island of like wildlife filmmaking? I have no clue. I'm working on it. But yeah, I think just watch anything and everything.
Mhm.
That's an awful answer, sorry.
It's a good answer, I think. Let's see if everyone else has different ones. Saleyha.
So I would recommend going to maybe watch what other new filmmakers and emerging filmmakers have been making, just to measure yourself up against them. So one place I would go, and I was actually part of this scheme, it was run by the Scottish Documentary Institute, and it was called Bridging the Gap, and they have got stacks of bite-sized short less than 10-minute documentaries on their website, and one of mine is on there, yes, but what I found really useful when I was preparing for that pitch was watching everyone else's, because you can often have a great amount of self-doubt, but then you realize actually you can measure yourself up against the others, and it was a great confidence boost. And I think watching short documentaries as well is a really great learning experience, and you know, start small, bite-sized, and then craft it up from them. But the Scottish Documentary Institute's Bridging the Gap scheme, hundreds of little documentaries I'd recommend watching.
Fab, and I believe there is a link in the chat for anyone who wants to access that. Thanks to the RTS technical team for being incredibly speedy. And Kat, what about you? Where would you point people?
Yeah. Well, obviously it's AJ Plus's field team films, but then also I would say looking at Vice News, and Hind Hassan's team has done some incredible pieces out of Sheikh Jarrah and Afghanistan, sorry, just completely brain freeze there, this year. Really, really, really incredible work, or I've just been kind of blown away by how they've done it, and the access they've got, and they always just seem to be slightly ahead of the story, you know, they're always just like getting out just at the right time. And then also shout out actually to Unreported World, which I think has done some incredible pieces over the year, and just really great that there is a series out there still that is doing that work, you know, underreported stories and bits of the world that people just don't hear about. And I just remember, like, from a very young age being, you know, seeing stories on Colombia and just thinking, oh, this is the only place that's doing this kind of work, and you know, knowing that they do it on like pretty kind of tight, you know, pretty tight resources. It's incredible what they do, I think, and I know there's a good back catalogue there on all four, so do check them out.
And on YouTube.
And on YouTube, of course. Yeah, doing well. Yeah.
And the links for all of those are in the chat box. I think that brings us about to the end of this evening. Thank you so much to our panel, who have been better than I could ever have even dreamed. Yes, thank you all very much. Kat Hayes, wonderful. Amy Thompson, wonderful. Saleyha Ahsan, fantastic and wonderful. Thank you all, everyone who's watched, and thank you to anyone who watches in future on YouTube. There will be more RTS events coming up. We have the Careers Fair early next year, and yeah, stay involved. Thank you to everyone. Have a good evening.